The Americans have elected a new president. Who that will be, well, we're still waiting to find out. But we've got some numbers that will give us some clues.
That's right.
Christine.
Why don't we have a look at how that race is shaping up, that race to 270. Of course, our magic number tonight is 270. That is the number of electoral college votes that are needed to secure a victory. And, Eamon, why don't we just take a pause here and just discuss the electoral college for our viewers who aren't well-versed in the system. Just give us an explanation of what this electoral college is.
I'd say even for an American who went through the school system, you still need a refresher every now and then. So the U.S. is the only presidential democracy in the world where the winner of the popular vote doesn't necessarily become the president. So the loser of the popular vote might become the president. And that's because we don't, in the U.S., vote directly for president. We vote in each state for electors. The number of the electors is based on the population of the state. So that's why everybody's focused on Pennsylvania. Happens to be the swing state with the most electors. California is a huge state. It has 54 electoral college votes, but we basically know that it's going to go Democratic. It's gone Democratic in the past several elections, so that's a safe state. So that's why we're all focused on swing states, because you don't need to get the popular vote overall. You need to get the popular vote in a certain number of states. This year it's 7, where the vote is the margin is so small that the number of electoral votes could go either way. And don't forget, this is winner takes all. So if you vote in Pennsylvania, several million people live there, but if it goes in favor of Trump by 10 people's votes, or in Florida in 2000, Bush won by 537 votes, all of Florida's 30 I think back then it was different, but this year it's 30 electoral college votes goes just to the winner of the state. Yeah. So that's why we're so focused on electoral college votes, and that's why we're so focused on swing states, because that's where we don't know where these number of electoral college votes are going to go in the end.
Yeah, and there are 7 swing states this time round.
This year, right.
Yeah, so why don't we go and have a look now, because more polls have been closing, so to say, vote closing. Let's have a look at the geographical map, and that will give us a sense of what the tally is nationwide. All right, guys, let's see how well you know the map. What can you see in terms of what's been called? We're still waiting for some concrete results to come out of certain places, like Texas, for example. I'm pretty sure we'll be getting a result out of Texas very soon. It will probably go Republican. But look at everything else. I mean, Illinois, we've been saying that we don't have many surprises right now. Your North Dakota will likely, and just the caveat here is obviously the lighter shade is the projection of what the result will be when the full tally comes in.
For our viewers, I want to just be clear on that. So the light blue means we're expecting them to go Democrat.
That's right.
Light red means Republican.
That's right.
The dark colors are the ones where states have already been called.
Exactly. So look at Illinois. And then, of course, your states on the East Coast over there, Vermont, which, the likes of Maine, etc., which we know have gone or stayed Democrat, so to say. So that is how that map, and you'll see that as the time zone shifts to the West Coast, we'll get more colour on that map. There'll be less grey on that. But before we came on air, remember you were telling us, Amir, about how after the Reagan election, when the whole map was red. I mean, I've never seen something like that. Right. And we won't have a map looking like that after
every state except was Minnesota went for Ronald Reagan.
That was 1984.
Yeah.
Can we pull that map back up again?
Let's get the geographical map back on there.
Because we need to look at what is being projected right now. Can we pull that map back up? So, Georgia and North Carolina both. I mean, it's still early. They haven't. These haven't been called, but they're projected. The thinking is that they're tending to go. So we were saying earlier, if Georgia and North Carolina, both swing states, go for Donald Trump, the chances of a Harris victory are diminished significantly.
Yeah. Then she needs to sweep the upper Midwest. She needs to take Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin. I will say that these votes, I appreciate that Georgia and North Carolina on this have got the kind of light red.
Yes.
Let's be very, very careful. Yeah. We don't have the full picture here. We know that in Georgia, Atlanta, which is where Harris is going to get most of her votes, those votes are not going to come in. We've got to remember that the votes don't come in across the whole state at the same time, and we know that the geography of the state is really important. So if you've got a big city city like an Atlanta in Georgia or a Detroit in Michigan, that's where the Democrats are going to run up the score and going to get all those votes. So it really depends on the makeup of what those votes that we've got at the moment are. If it's strongly leaning towards mail-in ballots, then we would expect that the Democratic Party would perform better. If we've then got then over time, then the kind of more rural areas from the Republicans coming in, and then at the end, we likely see these kind of bigger urban areas, and so we have this kind of this temporal shift of who's ahead. So I appreciate they're red on the map right now, but the Georgia and North Carolina, very provisional. We're not making any statements about those. We're only, talking about having called these dark blue states. So, for example, here we can see that if we look at somewhere like Kansas, the KS in the middle here, at the moment that's in light blue. Now, everyone would very strongly expect that Donald Trump is going to win Kansas. Probably this light blue comes from the mail-in ballots leaning more Democratic.
That's right. That's right.
But just looking up top there, the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, light blue. Again, of course, you've given us that caveat, but that trend of they go the same way and tend to go the same way, right? So
those three states in particular tend to move as a unit. They have kind of similar demographic properties. They have kind of similar backgrounds with industry, and so and then similarly have this division between one or two big urban areas that are strongly Democrat, and then more rural areas that then lead.
And
more.
what you were describing too, I think Nate Cohn at the New York Times was calling this too like a red mirage that you get as we're going through the evening, where you think that these states are going to be red or Republican, but that's because, as you're saying, the demographics and the votes being counted still have to be.
This, of course, especially last time when so many people voted by mail, and obviously then Trump said, don't vote by mail. Of course, what this does is it also opens up opportunities for maybe a nefarious candidate to say, hey, this doesn't seem right. Look, I was in the lead, and then suddenly all these ballots were found. And that has been exactly what Trump has been saying in the past. So we just need to be really careful to say, OK, well, it might be that it looks like it's leaning one way, but then we get all the votes in from somewhere like Atlanta or Detroit. And that all that is the full picture. It's not that it's not that someone's done anything nefarious or found any other votes in
why don't we just break it down very quickly on a state-by-state basis? So let's get North Carolina. We can get a sense of how much of that vote's actually been counted, factoring in the caveat that we've presented up front here. So let's have a look at the state of North Carolina. And 40% of the vote has been counted there. Perhaps, would you say that's still too early to make a call right here?
Yeah, again, so it depends where that 40% comes from. What percentage of that 40% has come from mail-in ballots? What percentage of that is coming from rural areas? You would expect that larger cities, places like Raleigh, for example, Charlotte, are going to take longer just because of the nature of the vote there. And so, again, it would not surprise me at all to see that over the next couple of hours, that lead for Trump increases. But then when we get nearer to the 100%, then we get something that kind of fully reflects the picture of what's going on.
And it might be worth saying, for our international audience, a lot of times when you look at the United States, you see all the different states and you think, oh, this is like the European Union. The country is divided by state. But the major divide that I see anyway, and I think most people are in agreement, is between cities and countryside, so urban and rural areas. So the red states are not necessarily, they have their own issues that they're voting for. What you see in a red state is generally where the population is divided more evenly distributed between rural and big cities, whereas you have a place like New York where most of the population lives in New York City, so it's an urban state. And they vote on issues that are important to people who live in big cities. There's also huge immigrant communities. You have higher black populations, and black Americans vote for Democrats in higher numbers. So what you're seeing really when you look at this map of the US where you see red and blue states, you're seeing a kind of general breakdown of where are the urban populations and where are the rural populations.
It's a very good point. Why don't we do Georgia, a place which is home to the city of Atlanta, which, to your point, right, where you have a huge voting bloc of African Americans. So, so we're almost 70% into that vote count over there. Donald Trump having that lead, that is, of course,
the difference is getting smaller. as more of the votes come in between the two candidates.
Yeah, and we'll just remind everybody that this is where Biden won, right, in 2020. It was that unexpected flip that Biden took Georgia.
And we saw that firsthand because when we were in Atlanta, Georgia, where you have that's the biggest city in the South, a lot of people say, there's a very high black population there, and there was huge lines to vote. A lot of people came out in strong numbers to vote for Biden, especially from the black community there, and it took a long time to count those votes. Since then, what you've seen is Republicans who are trying to counter that by implementing laws that would make it more difficult for those communities to vote. That's the way the Democrats frame it anyway. You've had, right after that election, you had local Republicans implement a law where you weren't allowed to hand out water at polling stations. And I remember being there, it was like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so in the high 30s
degrees Celsius for the rest of us.
And somebody passed out, had to be taken away on in an ambulance. So water was very important. That's one of the things that kept people standing in lines for that long. So there is a push in states like Georgia to make sure that the urban populations who vote for Democrats, that it might be not as easy for them to come out in strong numbers.
And what we're seeing, just as a data point here, I've got in these states, what we're seeing is roughly an extra 5% shift towards Trump in these rural areas, but we're seeing a shift back towards Harris in these more suburban areas. And again, the suburban areas are shifting slightly towards Harris, and the more rural areas are shifting towards Trump, but we just don't know about the urban areas yet. And so there are some reports people are saying, particularly I saw a bunch of people talking earlier about Philadelphia, just massive amounts of turnout, way higher turnout than we've seen. But we just don't know yet because these are the places that take the longest to count by their very nature. They're huge cities. There's just a huge amount of people in these places. And so we might look at that Georgia result for now and say, oh, OK, that's a bit more, even with knowing the vote map we've got at the moment, that's a bit more towards Trump than we thought. But if the bit that we haven't got yet moves even further towards Harris, then she's likely still going to be competitive.
And we are so conditioned to, because of the way politics in general is reported, but particularly in the United States, we're conditioned to expect this horse race reporting, right? So, you're told who's ahead today, who's ahead tomorrow, but actually that has no impact on who actually wins the race. So, your point's well taken. Patience is really a virtue on Election Day. It may not get you elected, but it
I like the way you put it, Brent. You said America has already chosen the next president. We just have to find out who it is.
That's right.
Okay, let's do one more, Pennsylvania, because this is really the big prize of the night. 19 electoral college votes. It's a key state. Some projections suggest that you win Pennsylvania and you've got upwards of a 90% chance of making it into the White House. But let's just begin with that initial caveat that only 18% of the vote, less than a fifth of the votes, have been counted in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris with a sizable lead over there, but this is, of course, a crucial state, Pennsylvania, going into this election.
Okay.